He's one of the most famous people in all of history, right? But was he a revolutionary hero or just a power-hungry tyrant? Today, we're going to unpack one of history's greatest contradictions, Napoleon Bonaparte.
All right, so here's the game plan for this explainer. We're going to start with the Napoleonic paradox itself. Then, we'll track his insane rise from general to emperor, see how he literally forged a new France, conquered a continent, and finally, how it all came crashing down. So, let's kick things off with Section 1, the Napoleonic paradox.
You know, to really get Napoleon, you have to imagine the world he stepped into. He came right out of what our source material calls the smoking cultural and social rubble of the French Revolution. This wasn't just a change in government. It was years of total chaos, violence, and uncertainty. France was broken, and people were absolutely desperate for a strong leader to just make it stop.
And this right here, this is the core of the whole puzzle. On the one hand, he was all about revolutionary ideas. Legal equality, jobs based on talent, protecting property rights. But on the other hand, he built this incredibly authoritarian state. He tore down democracy, censored the press, and used a secret police to hunt down anyone who disagreed with him. The man was a total walking contradiction.
So, how in the world does a guy like that rise so high, so unbelievably fast? Well, that brings us to Section 2, from general to emperor.
His climb was just meteoric. He's made a general in 1794, and his wins in Italy give him this glowing reputation. And let me tell you, he was a genius at propaganda. He had paintings made, he controlled the news from the front, he basically invented his own heroic image. He even used it to hide the fact that his campaign in Egypt was kind of a failure. By 1799, he uses that fame to stage a coup and take over. Then just 5 years later, in this incredible moment of pure ego, he crowns himself emperor, saying that only he was strong enough to protect the revolution's ideals. Okay, so he's got absolute power. Now what's he going to do with it? Let's dive into Section 3, Forging a New France. What he does next is fascinating. He starts building a modern, stable France. His Napoleonic Code created a single set of laws for all men and protected private property. He made peace with the Catholic Church, which was a huge deal that ended years of religious fighting and brought a ton of stability. And he built a government where jobs went to the most talented people, not just guys with fancy titles. He was building a truly modern state from the ground up.
But, and this is a huge but, all that modern efficiency came with an iron fist. He had a massive secret police force that would sniff out conspiracies and make his enemies disappear. He shut down newspapers left and right, controlling everything people read. And that famous Napoleonic Code? Well, it also made women legally dependent on their fathers or husbands. See? For Napoleon, progress and repression were two sides of the same coin.
And of course, Napoleon's ambitions didn't stop at the borders of France. He wanted, well, everything. Which takes us to Section 4, Conquering a Continent.
By 1810, this guy literally called himself the Emperor of Europe. He set up this massive grand empire, and it basically had 3 layers. First, you have the core territories that France controlled directly. Second, you had these satellite kingdoms that he just handed over to his brothers and sisters to rule. And third, you have the Allied states, countries he'd already beaten in war, who now had to do whatever he said. He was literally redrawing the map of Europe to his liking.
And here's that paradox again. As his armies marched across Europe, they weren't just conquering. They were bringing the French Revolution with them, getting rid of old aristocratic privileges, even ending slavery in some places. So in a strange way, his imperial army was spreading revolutionary ideas.
But, and he did not see this coming, his conquests accidentally created his own worst enemy, nationalism. As French soldiers occupied countries from Spain to Germany, the local people started to think, hey, wait a minute. These guys aren't our liberators, they're foreign bullies. This powerful feeling of wanting your own culture and your own country back, it would become a fire he just couldn't put out.
And that fire, that resistance, mixed with a healthy dose of his own arrogance, well, it was a recipe for disaster. Time for Section 5, The Emperor's End.
It all starts to unravel with one single catastrophic decision, invading Russia in 1812. He puts together the largest European army ever seen, the Grande Armée. We're talking about an unbelievable force of 600,000 soldiers marching east.
But the Russians were smart. They just kept retreating, burning everything behind them in a scorched earth strategy. Napoleon's army found no food, no shelter, just a brutal Russian winter. So, of those 600,000 men who marched in, only about 40,000 staggered back out. It wasn't just a defeat, it was an annihilation.
After a disaster like that, his whole image of being invincible was just shattered. The other European powers ganged up on him, and in 1814 they forced him to abdicate and exiled him to the island of Elba. But he wasn't done yet. In 1815, he escapes, comes back to France, and raises another army. It's an incredible comeback story known as the 100 Days. But it all ends at the Battle of Waterloo, his final crushing defeat. This time, they sent him to St. Helena, a lonely rock in the middle of the Atlantic, and that's where he died.
Which brings us right back to where we started. On the one hand, he locked in some of the revolution's biggest ideas, like equality and merit. On the other, he did it by destroying liberty and building a military empire. So what's the verdict? Was he the heir who saved the revolution from chaos? Or was he its undertaker who buried its democratic dreams? It's a question historians are still fighting over today.